Well, Easter weekend has come and gone, Passover weekend. It's a time for great amount of spirituality, at least among Christians and Jews, and it is also a season of rebirth and renewal and all of those things. And over the course of Easter weekend, we saw two examples of the difference between being woke and being awake. Really, more concisely, two crystal clear examples of the difference between virtue signaling and actual virtue. Let's start with the woke. As many of you know, Georgia has implemented new voting laws, which Joe Biden has called Jim Crow on steroids. And just as a brief aside, there's a perfect opportunity for Republicans to have inserted into the conversation the fact that the Jim Crow laws were provided by Democrats, written by Democrats, enforced by Democrats, all of Jim Crow is a result of Democrats and their oppression of black people in the South. I don't know how many Republican politicians let that one slide by, but you just can't drop balls like that, guys. That's a pop fly to center field. You can't drop the ball like that. That is a point that has to be hammered again and again and again. People would never believe you if you told them that, and they'd have to go look it up. And just that alone is worth, I think, bearing mention. But nevertheless, these laws, which are supposedly so draconian, are simply designed to make sure that the people who vote in Georgia are legal voters. It actually expands legal voting in a lot of different ways, but that's not the point, you see. The point is that any attempt to regain election integrity of any kind at all has to be immediately denounced as racist and all of the rest of the ists and isms, and utterly blown out of the water in terms of peer pressure and social proof before some silly idea like that has a chance to catch fire all across the country. And of course, the residents of Georgia who essentially passed this law, every one of them's a racist as well, needless to say. Now, Major League Baseball has decided to pull a major game out of Atlanta because of the racism of the Georgia election laws. And my example for the woke award of the week doesn't even go to MLB. It goes to Delta Airlines. You know, Delta Airlines, the company that flies airplanes and takes passengers from one point to another, that political instrument, Delta Airlines, which of course is based in Atlanta, responding to this passage of the Georgia voter laws, here's what the president of an airline had to say. Delta CEO Ed Bastian said, quote, "The law is unacceptable and does not match Delta's values." And he added that now is the time to fully understand all that is in the bill. And he went on and on and on and on and on about what a tragic violation of civil rights this is. So when you hear something like that, I don't know what your first reaction is, but my first reaction to that is twofold. Number one, what the hell is the president of an airline making a public statement for on this? What does that have to do with anything? Does he actually think that everybody that flies Delta is a graduate of Berkeley School of Interpretive Dances? Is that his actual opinion? Delta is an airline. Most of the money that Delta makes, especially in these lean times, is business travel, and business travel is by no means one-sided. What he has done with this statement is to tell half of the people in the country that fly Delta that they're a bunch of miserable racists, and that's the official Delta airline position. My second response is when he says that these voting laws are, quote, unacceptable and do not, quote, reflect Delta's values, unquote. Makes me wonder how I would feel if I was an employee of Delta living in Georgia and I had the person who I work for just come out and tell the world what my political opinions are because they don't reflect my values at Delta, and I'm a part of Delta. The sheer audacity of this, the nerve of it. So you've got that whole thing. And one of the things we've noticed, I think, that I've noticed in the years now that this cancel culture has really started to accelerate, is that of all the people in the country, the ones who are the most spineless by far, are the people that we once used to call the captains of industry. It's the corporate execs, it's the CEOs that are the most craven cowards when it comes to this kind of thing, by far. Do they do it to protect their bottom line? Is that it? Do they think this is some kind of preemptive way of ensuring that they're not singled out and boycotted? Get woke, go broke, as far as I know, is one of those few rules that has no exceptions. I'm not aware of anything that's contradicted that particular economic law. So whether he believes it or not, certainly the evidence flies in the face of this kind of a statement. And needless to say, large numbers of people, myself included, have decided that we won't be flying Delta again unless that's the only way to get there. And Delta has, I think, 7 nonstop flights from Los Angeles directly to hell on a daily basis. So there must be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people out there who are outraged that this man has made a statement on their behalf when an airline has no business making any kind of statement about any kind of political issue other than perhaps airline regulation or the FAA or something along those lines. Who does this guy think he is? Well, we know who he thinks he is. I'm not particularly keen on the idea of bailing out Delta Airlines when guys like this CEO undoubtedly have bought up a lot of airline stock for their own personal portfolios, and now they expect taxpayers to help bail them out of this crisis, which is basically shut down airline travel. I'm not inclined to want to do that under the best of circumstances. But for you to call me and half the country racist because we think that voter integrity is important, I'll fly the friendly skies of United, is what I'll do. Now, as it turns out, the weekend was not without its high points. In fact, this Easter weekend may have contained one of the high points of the entire COVID catastrophe of the last year. I want to show you a clip that's been getting an awful lot of attention. I'm going to play the whole thing. It's 2 minutes and 20 seconds long. It's not terribly long. It is a little bit repetitive, but I think that's the point, really, is the hammer blow quality of it. And I think you'll enjoy it because the sound you're about to hear is the sound of somebody who's awake. It's the sound of somebody with actual virtue, not just virtue signaling. It is strident, it is strong, it is passionate, it is committed, and it is courageous. It is precisely the opposite of the mewling pablum to come out of the mouth of the CEO of Delta Airlines. And here it is from a pastor of a church in Calgary, Canada.
Please get out. Get out of this property. Immediately get out. Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property immediately until you come back with a warrant. Out. 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 Out of this property. Immediately out. Immediately go out and don't come back. I don't want to talk to you. Not a word. Out of this property. Immediately out. I don't care what you have to say. Out. Out. Out of this property, you Nazis. Out. Out. Gestapo is not allowed here. Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed. Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out. Out. You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Gestapo is not welcome here. Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths. Unbelievable, sick, evil people. Intimidating people in a church during the Passover. You Gestapo, Nazi, communists, fascists. Don't you dare coming back here. Can you imagine those psychopaths? Passover, the holiest Christian festival in a year, and they're coming to intimidate Christians during the holiest festival? Unbelievable. What is wrong with those sick psychopaths?
That is Pastor Artur Pawlowski of his church in Calgary, Canada. It's the moral outrage that is generated by this pastor, which is the only appropriate response to this kind of thing. He hit it right on the head. He said they're trying to intimidate Christians on this holiest of holy days by coming into this church without a warrant and talking about COVID restrictions and social distancing and so on and so on and so on. And the thing that I found immediately fascinating about this, among many, many, many other things, was the fact that this man, speaking with a thick accent, called them communists and Nazis. Now, Harvard intellectuals will tell you that communists are on one side and Nazis on the other, and that they're mortal enemies and you have to be one or the other. Anybody who knows anything about totalitarianism knows that, yes, communism and Nazis have been at war with each other in the same way that Coke and Pepsi have been at war with each other. They're both colas. Just because they're at war with each other doesn't make them any opposite. They're both authoritarian states that use physical intimidation, coercion, and oppression in order to get what they want. And this guy is from Poland. And that's telling me that while he's probably too young to have lived through the war, he certainly, without question, coming from that particular patch of ground, understands exactly what both the Soviets and the Nazis are exactly like. He's seen them both, or his family has anyway, his parents have. He's seen both of them. He called him a Gestapo. Is he overreacting? Well, certainly the Calgary police have not taken 6 million Jews out and murdered them, and that needs to be said because people who equate police actions with actual Nazis need to make it pretty clear that the only difference between the two is 6 million or 12 million dead on one hand in extermination camps and then, violation of civic laws or whatever in the other. But nevertheless, with that said, he's on the money here. Growing up in Poland, this man understands what the intrusion of the state into people's lives means. He understands what the intrusion of the state into religion means. And he most clearly understands that the arrival of these people on Easter, and as he described it, Passover weekend, the arrival of this Karen, this public official, on that day, without a warrant, simply strolling in there and dictating to the congregation that the state is more powerful than their religion and they will have to disperse or whatever she was there for, all of that stuff. He knows what that looks like. He's smelled that smell before, and he called it what it is. It is a totalitarian intrusion of freedom of religion that has been protected in the West since there's been a West. We'll post this link to the clip so you can watch it at your leisure. I've probably seen it 7 or 8 times. But look at the faces of the police officers, because I don't think she's a police officer. If I read it correctly, she's a public health official. If you watch it again, look at the police officers, the actual policemen. They don't look enraged to me. They don't look angry to me. They look embarrassed to me. That's how they look. They look embarrassed. They look sheepish. When he calls them the Gestapo and the Nazis and secret police and communists and all the rest, a couple of those officers are looking down at the sidewalk as they walk away. They're looking down at the sidewalk because they know this guy's right. And I wonder how many law enforcement officials in the country have had that experience. There's no question that a number of them gleefully do this. It's been pretty clear that they will gleefully go into churches and tell people to disband or whatever the case may be because the state has decreed that we have to break up these churches or these religious gatherings for the sake of public safety. But I wonder how many police officers have been called to these kind of things. How many police officers are fundamentally ashamed of what they're being told to do, ordered to do, by the bureaucrats and the administrators and people that basically control their jobs and their lives? A series of junior people, many cases unelected public health officials, suddenly drunk with power, intoxicated with the ability to tell other people what to do, sending out teams and squads across the city, exercising this newfound authority. It's kind of like a parking meter attendant who's been given an AR-15 and a license to kill. It's this grandiosity of it. And that's, I think, probably is the thing I'd just like to close with, because all of the people, the actual cogs in the machine of oppression, totalitarianism, and all the rest, and murder, all of the cogs are small little people who really, really, really like the idea of having authority. Every apartment block in the Soviet Union had 2 or 3 or 4 professional informants. Just little people, bitter people, nosy people, gossips, Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched, always looking in somebody else's window, always looking for a chance to curry favor with the authorities by ratting this person out or ratting that person out. That's the mechanism that keeps a police state going. And that is what this guy is basically doing. He's calling them out. And of all the words he uses in his moral outrage, I think the one I like best is psychopaths. What are you psychopaths doing here? How dare you psychopaths enter my property without a warrant? This man is not woke like the Delta CEO. He's awake. He's awake. Like most of us, he understands where these things lead, where they go. That if we don't stand up to them loudly and effectively and with genuine moral outrage, and if we don't put shame on the people who are trying this power grab, if we don't take and keep, in other words, the moral high ground, then we will eventually lose this fight. If every single person in the country reacted to the woke mob the way that this pastor did, there wouldn't be a woke mob. We wouldn't be in any of the trouble that we're in right now. Forget everybody in the country, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 50, 1 out of 100. How small a percentage of genuinely morally courageous people do we need to lead us out of this wilderness? Mark Twain estimated it was 1 in 10,000 would do it. But I'll tell you this, on Easter weekend, it was great to hear the voice of somebody who believed in his religion, believed in the idea of freedom of religion, and who came from a country that had suffered so horrifically at the hands of both Nazis and communists, a man who was so keenly attuned to the sound of impending totalitarianism that when he saw these policemen and Officer Karen in his church on Easter Sunday, he reacted with the only appropriate response, and that was unbridled moral outrage.